Sup, Facebook. All right. There's a concept. I don't know how familiar a lot of you are with this, but how the elite of the world, so think of the billionaires, the people who run the banks, the people who run the media, the people at the very high levels. And if you don't um, know much about this, but are curious for real perspective on this, that's grounded in, research, um, grounded in lots and lots of research and historical um, investigation. Check out John Taylor Gatto. I posted a lot about his interview recently. There's this 5 hour interview he did called "The Secret Underground History," something like that. Um, and he explains how throughout the ages, the people that ran the world, how they approach basically controlling the masses. And if you, again, like also check out Century of the Self. That's another phenomenal documentary. Hypernormalization, another one from Adam Curtis. That's really good at explaining how a few people at the very top who have the money and can influence public perception are able to really influence the crowd. They detail in Century of the Self how Edward Bernays invented PR because I think it was the Rockefellers or the Morgans. One of them had this situation happen where there was a union striking, like they didn't want to work. And he said in the National Guard, this is in Colorado, and freaking killed these people, killed them on U.S. soil. Where is that taught about in the history books? And so just watch Century of the Self. It explains all this, right? And that was where PR came from. Because I believe it was the Rockefellers, and they had a really bad rep. So they employed Edward Bernays to make them look better, right? That's that's whack. That is whack, but that's the world we live in, ladies and gentlemen. Um, So these people at the top, like the Rockefellers and all of them, without getting into conspiracy theories and shit like that, it's just it makes sense when you really look at it as how these people maintain control because they don't think that the average human can change. So if you were in charge of a whole nation of people or the whole world and you wanted people to not get unrest and not get unruly and just kind of go with the flow, you would set up certain things like ways of influencing public perspective, public opinion, to keep things moving forward. Well, as I've been looking at this, there's this phrase that keeps popping up, and it is problem, reaction, solution. So just look at this. If you ever seen what's that documentary called? Zeitgeist? That's a good one. If you haven't seen Zeitgeist, watch Zeitgeist. Watch it all with a grain of salt. I'm not telling you you have to believe this stuff, but just look at it and look at what the case that they make. If you're not open minded to any of this, well, congrats, you've been brainwashed by the system. But if you are at least somewhat open minded, watch it, use discernment. Again, you don't have to believe anything, but just see it for yourself. So, for example, in Zeitgeist, they profile what happened with the war on terror and how there was a problem, which is terrorism, and then there's a reaction, so everyone reacts, and then the solution they propose is stuff like the Patriot Act. So now, I mean, just check out what Edward Snowden's exposing too. Fascinating. In terms of how you can basically be detained, even as a U.S. citizen, under the premise that you could be a threat as a terrorist. And I get it. Like, if you're at the top, you have to look at things like terrorism. I'm not saying terrorism isn't real or anything like that, but I'm saying the way in which this happens is it's problem, so terrorist attack, solution, or problem, and then reaction. Everyone reacts, and then there's a solution that's proposed. But usually what happens is it's certain people at the top use the solution and use the fact that everyone's reactive and in a reactive state to then introduce something to then um, make the people kind of go along with the agenda. And this has happened throughout history. Now look at even more recently. There is a virus that's going around, and everyone has reacted to it. And now there's a solution that is being pushed heavy. Don't believe me? Just scroll through your news feed and just wait. On the fourth post down, guess what? You're going to see how Beyonce or whoever the latest celebrity is apparently getting this jab in the arm that is going to protect them from said virus. Problem, reaction, solution. What is the alternative? Because that is not the best way of going about things, right? Do we want people to just be reactive? I don't. Consider this. There's a difference between a reaction and a response. Getting a call. Reaction is when you're getting you're in an emotional state and you're out of your ability to reason and use common sense and you're just in fear and then you make a decision and usually it's going to have a consequence. If you're reacting, I can basically guarantee there's going to be consequence if you're doing that. What's the alternative? Is taking responsibility, is responding. So yeah, you hear about something, something that happens. Okay, there's a virus. Okay, cool. Let's breathe. Let's look at, okay, first, what is a virus? Okay, what is an immune system? What makes sense here? What's the downside of whatever action that we take? And then we make the most common sense decision. That's that's now morphing this from, instead of us just all being reactive, to us taking responsibility. So here's a cooler formula that I found. Instead of problem, reaction, solution, it's problem, solution, reward. Problem, solution, reward. That's my focus. I see the biggest problem facing the world is education and a lack of education. Right now, the average person cannot actually read, cannot comprehend what they're reading. We live in a culture where it's clickbait titles, headlines, and it's hidden behind a paywall, right? So the New York Times article that you want to see so badly, you got to pay, $2.99 a month or whatever for it. Like that is that's what's happening to our world. And as attention levels get even lower, we're screwed because we're just going to be basically spoon fed whatever few people at the very top making the decisions want us to see. So what's the solution? So the problem being lack of education. And yeah, you can say, oh, well, our problem is that, it's a political system. And the problem is that there's not enough food for everyone. There's problems, right? At the end of the day, if it's like teach a man to fish and then he'll be fed for life. But if you just give someone a fish, I mean, give him a fish and teach him how to fish. That's a pretty good solution. So what does it look like with education is, yeah, help people be educated enough so that we can get out of survival mode. And then long term, we need a systematic way of helping equalize the playing field at the top, though. So it's not bring everyone down to some shitty level of education. That's not good for anyone. Rather, it's bring everybody up to the highest level of education so that the average person can be as smart as Elon Musk or as Bill Gates. But you don't have to have the same starting point of, for example, Bill Gates, which is optimizing the planet. If you watch his Netflix documentary, they ask him what's his ultimate goal. He says optimization. What does that mean? I don't know. Some people think he's a saint. Some people think he's the Antichrist. I think he's just a billionaire who's really effective and he wants to maintain control and he thinks the average person can't really change. And so he's doing his part to optimize things. What Bill Gates doesn't know is that the average human can change. You can change yourself on a deep subconscious and unconscious level that previously, before the solution existed, it was not possible. It's like what you get exposed to in those first 7 years of your life, that's what you get programmed with. And some people get a really effective vocabulary, they know how to navigate the world, and they become an effective human, and therefore they make money, and they don't have to just live in survival mode. But most people are not given an effective vocabulary, and the vocabulary they are given in those early years is tainted with a ton of emotional, energetic reactions. So we can't even effectively navigate reality. We're just like reactive. And that's what we can change now. And so that's what self-perfected, that's what TechnoTutor is all about, is getting people an education so you can process reality as it is and look at situations and apply common sense and not go into reactive mode, but go into immediately solution mode. And then when you have problem and then solution, guess what happens? You get a reward. And that reward could be money, it could be connections, it could be happiness, it could be enjoyment. And the reward that I'm going for is that we change the system. I want to actually change the system so that we have a money system so it guarantees that no one's just dying from preventable causes. So these 20,000 children a day that are dying right now don't have to go through that. But guess what? We have a money system and we have different currencies in the currency markets that fluctuate. So right now, $100 of my US currency is very different than someone who lives in Zimbabwe. And It's ridiculous that we currently have this situation, but that's got us to here. The school system, the money system, all of us has got us to here. But now we get to look at this. Are we just going to react to it and then wait for some solution to be presented, like universal basic income or something like that from the government as it currently is? I don't want that reality where I have to abide by a certain set of rules just to get some universal basic income, because that's where it's headed. Look up in what they're doing in China right now, and how you can get locked out of your bank account and you can be prevented from traveling if you drop below a certain level. And even if you go jaywalking in China, guess what? They have facial recognition everywhere, and you get marked basically. It's just like your credit score, like at least we have here in America, where you get dinged. And if you go below a certain amount, there's a consequence. I don't want that to be the case, especially bringing kids into the world and just in general. I don't want to live in a world where I have to worry about what I say on social media, or I have to worry about am I abiding by the rules as whoever wrote the rules exists. Let's create a system where everyone has common sense and equal education so that we can reason for ourselves what makes sense, and we can self enforce and we can take self responsibility. So there's no leader that we look to. Rather, we're all self leaders that operate from the principles of equality, meaning we see the equal value between humans. So I'm not better, you're not better, we're equal. As well as the oneness, realizing I'm one person, you're one person. We can be one plus one. Oh, I think my AirPods are messed up. Thank you, Hannah. I'm gonna watch this. I'm gonna make sure it's good. I can make a sequel to this. But yeah, I'm gonna make sure that my audio is good here because I don't want to waste my time and I don't want to waste your time with shitty audio. But if it's still working, problem, solution, reward. Let's focus on that specifically with education.